There are still a few points to look into regarding the experience of the apostles in encountering the risen Lord. We can still look into the relationship between resurrection and salvation. How was resurrection and how was salvation seen to be linked in the eyes of the apostles and the disciples of Jesus? And then we can look at how the experience of encountering the risen Lord has affected the interpretation about the life of Jesus before his death and resurrection. In other words, because of the encounter with the risen Lord, the apostles, the disciples of Jesus, will look back at the time when he was with them. Look back and try to make an interpretation of the times when they were living with Jesus before his death and resurrection. It will become clearer and clearer, this relationship between post-Easter and pre-Easter interpretation of Jesus. Until now, we are probably still confused with seeing the relationship between the post-Easter and the pre-Easter experiences with Jesus. When we come to the discussion of reinterpreting the life of Jesus in the light of the resurrection, we can understand better this relationship between pre-Easter and post-Easter experiences. This will also explain the fact that when the gospel writers wrote about Jesus and wrote about the concrete life of Jesus in Palestine, they were writing that in the light of the resurrection of Jesus. Our difficulties with this relationship between pre-Easter and post-Easter experiences, I think, is because we look at the story as a one-line story beginning with the beginning and ending with the ending. And we say that the beginning was the birth of Jesus and the ending was the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. We look and read the Gospels this way. But the Gospels were not this way. The Gospels were written beginning with the experience of Jesus as having risen. So the Gospels, in the minds of the Gospel authors, were first of all influenced by the resurrection experience. And then the Gospel authors looked back into the life of Jesus, into the life of Jesus with the disciples and the apostles. So notice that the Gospels were really written beginning with the experience of the risen Lord, and then only afterwards with a looking back into the life of Jesus. So notice, if the Gospels were written this way, if the Gospels began with the idea of the resurrection and then only later looked back into the life of Jesus, then we can understand why inside the Gospels we find so many stories that look like extraordinary, like the miracles. The miracles were written by the Gospel authors after the experience of the resurrection. And so, miracle stories were influenced by the resurrection. For us, we are in the habit of thinking that Jesus was doing extraordinary, super fantastic, wonderful things before his death and resurrection. And so we imagine that Jesus was already an extraordinary, super fantastic person even before his death and resurrection. But these extraordinary, super fantastic images of Jesus were written after the resurrection. And therefore, the gestures of Jesus before the resurrection were interpreted in the light of the resurrection. So let us try to adjust our way of reading the Gospels and move a little bit away from our habitual idea, our habitual reading of Jesus. Habitually, we think that Jesus was doing miracles and then he suffered, died, and rose from the dead. But again, let me repeat, in the Gospels, first, there was the experience of Jesus risen from the dead, and Jesus therefore exalted. And then, this was projected back, again, projected back into the life of Jesus. And so the life of Jesus, as written by the Gospel authors, was marked by the notion that Jesus was already exalted. I hope you understand this. Please repeat this video over and over again until you get it. And then talk to one another and see how others understand this, how others see it. This is very important because many of our difficulties with understanding Jesus Christ and even understanding our notion of salvation is rooted in this confusion we make about the link between pre-Easter and post-Easter experiences. For the moment, right now, at this moment, again, let us just review what we have been discussing for the past videos. We began with the before Easter experience with Jesus, and we saw how Jesus was manifesting himself to his disciples. This manifestation of Jesus had an impact on the disciples. The encounter with Jesus had a strong impact on the disciples. And so the disciples were trying to interpret their experiences of Jesus. When they were trying to interpret their experiences of Jesus, they were, of course, using ideas from their own Jewish cultures. So they were thinking of Jesus as probably a prophet, probably son of David, probably Messiah, probably this and that. So that was the before Easter experience. The before Easter experience was the concrete historical encounter of the disciples and Jesus. But during that time, things were not so clear. The disciples still did not quite know how to really interpret Jesus. The faith that they were having towards Jesus was still a faith that was fresh and growing and developing. So it was not yet a clear and distinct faith. The resurrection of Jesus, which was the important key element of post-Easter experience, this resurrection became an important aspect for the disciples, for the apostles. The resurrection had a big impact on the apostles. And the encounter with the risen Lord clarified so many things in the minds of the apostles. It clarified so many of the questions of the apostles. The resurrection of Jesus Christ became the key to the full understanding of who Jesus Christ was. This is why we can say that the resurrection started the full Christology, the full understanding and discourse about Jesus Christ. Now, there is one point that we need to keep in mind, and this is the Christology from below and from above. When we say Christology from below, we mean the Christology about Jesus Christ, human, living concretely in Palestine, and exalted in the right hand of God. So it is from below because it begins with the human experience with Jesus Christ, who was elevated to divine status. That is from below. We have not yet discussed the Christology from above. That will happen in our later videos and later discussions. We saw that for the apostles, the resurrection confirmed the exaltation of Jesus. Jesus sits at the right hand of the Father. The resurrection has affirmed the divine identity of Jesus, Son of God. The resurrection showed that the power of death did not have a final hold on all humanity. We will continue with this in our next videos.